So Islam is actually foundational to America. As soon as America had also established itself, Muslims were also here. In a way, it's very much like the Assam story, right? The Muslims were there alongside the Ahoms and alongside the other groups of people and building the Assamese community. But the Muslim is the one who is erased. And if we acknowledge the fact that Muslims were also foundational to America, then entire American history has to change. It's not just the white people coming and building and black people doing labor. The black people had religion and they had culture. And the religion that has been removed is Islam.
This ethnicity, religion, region, language, all of this ends up creating a reality for Muslims in Assam. And they become the ultimate niche of, the other, the final other.
But the people who claimed Assamese as their mother tongue were not given the benefits of becoming an Assamese. Rather, they are now being derided, insulted, humiliated, and dehumanized as Miya.
And you build this center with Dr. Chad Haynes on Center for Muslim Experience, and which largely also somehow talks about that alienation and how to deal with that. So what is this global alienation? That's not just restricted to this small Assamese, Miya, Ahom population, but it evolved into this larger global project.
So Muslim grief, Muslim suffering, that loneliness that I told you about has become unshareable because nobody's listening to it.
Is there space for the Muslim identity in the Western academia, as Western academia is seen to be very, diverse, very open, very liberal?
They have created a Frankenstein in their head and they're placing the Muslim in it and they're saying you are that, right? And our task is not to accept the dehumanization. I am human.
There's an unusual compassion which I think the AMU alumni feel for AMU. It's always there. Today on Nous Network, we are speaking with Professor Yasmin Saikia, a historian and peace scholar whose work spans from the memory of war in South Asia to the lived experiences of Muslims in the West. She is the Hart Nikachos Chair in Peace Studies at Arizona State University and co-directs the Center for Muslim Experience in the United States. In this episode, we explore what it means to belong when your history is erased, whether as a Miya in Assam, a label used to stigmatize Bengali origin Muslims, or as a Muslim in America viewed as foreign despite deep roots. Across borders, we examine how Muslims are cast as outsiders and how systems of exclusion and othering are created and sustained. Dr. Yasmin Saikia, welcome to Nous Podcast. We've been working on a project for a couple of months now. When I first met you online about this project on Islamophobia and how Islamophobia has only been seen as a way of how we are being otherized. And of course, that's true about it. But how can we reconnect to the larger society by telling those stories where we have coexisted? And so that project struck me in a way that we are only seeing the larger picture of negation or of Muslim identity, of dehumanization, of anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, whatever you could call it. But we are only seeing it from a perspective of a lived experience of somebody who's been marginalized. But there's also a perspective where you can, put your gaze or lens a little backwards and try to understand what is happening, how is happening, and where is it happening, and what is the cause of it. So we're living in a world which most of us agree is, in a certain level, it's global Islamophobia, localizing in different contexts. But it's also in India, because I'm coming from India, and all of this, what is happening, especially after 2014 in the BJP regime, it is distinctly something which we thought only existed in either the Western European context or anywhere else. Muslims saw themselves as deeply embedded and integrated in what we call India. And so in the 2019-20, when the CAA movement happened, for the first time I realized there's something called the CAA debate in Assam for a longer period. You are from Assam. You are an Indian Muslim. You are an Indian Muslim woman. You are an Indian Muslim woman who studied in a minority institution called AMU. And you're an Indian Muslim woman who studied in AMU, went out in a larger world where is global Islamophobia, gender, and then you made a place for yourself. Why did you choose to engage with the themes that you engaged? Assam, identity politics, belonging, history, South Asian history, to talk about reclaiming spaces, memory. So what is your journey? What is your background? How did you start from, being a Assamese woman, educating, coming to AMU? Please tell your story.
My story. Thank you, Ali. This is a conversation of both self and the self as in the context of, as you said, community and the world. And the self is not just an individual self; it's a biography of community that I carry with me, right? So starting at an individual level is not a personal story. It's a story of many other people that one can probably relate to. I grew up in Assam in the 70s I went to school in this kindergarten in the 70s or something. It was a very nice place, I think, as I remember. It was a place with beautiful wildlife, beautiful fauna. The Brahmaputra flowed along. And it was I grew up in Guwahati in Assam because my parents are both professors, so grew up there. And so it was a very quiet, quaint, in today's term, quaint, beautiful place in the sense that it had deep relationships with people. Assam was not rich in a material sense. It had a lot of resources and all of that, but it was not a fancy place, let's put it this way. It's a quiet backwater peripheral place, but it's very beautiful because of the relationships you had with people, and people knew one another. Everybody knew one another, everybody shared, everybody could talk about your grandparents, your great-grandparents kind of story. The familiarity was very comforting, right? You came from that place where everybody treated you like one, you belonged, and you were part of a unit called the Assamese society. So never really had to ask any questions about growing up. And then we were from a highly educated background. I come from I'm a third generation academic from my father's side of the family. And from my mother's side of the family, equally, absolutely very committed to the Assamese society and had done incredible amount of work right from the revolt of 1857. So it's a very long history that we have. Never had to really ask questions of that history. It was just part of you growing up, right? And all of us went to missionary schools, Catholic missionary schools, because that's the education we had in the northeast of India. Either you had mostly you had Western missionary schools because the vernacularization process had just started, I think, in the 70s. There was a language movement in the 60s. I don't know anything about that. I didn't live through that phase. So I can tell you about the 70s. There was a vernacularization, and so some people knowingly went to schools that taught in Assamese, and some of us went to English medium schools run by missionaries. So there was no question of the Hindu, Muslim, Christian. Everybody seemed to choose the places they would study. And from there, I never thought of my parents studied outside, but it was never really considered that you will go somewhere beyond Assam to study because we had good institutions. We had very good institutions. But then the Assam movement happened, and I was in class 10.
It was which year?
1979-80.
1979-80.
Right? Assam movement took place, and suddenly all schools and colleges closed down, and there was no opportunity to continue with your education. So the question became, where would I go to study? Means if it was unknown that schools and colleges would close down, right? So now that the schools and colleges had closed down, and you have to continue with your education, and particularly my parents, and all parents, I think, thought about that there should be a continuity. There cannot just be a disruption in people's education. So being in high school or entering high school, Delhi was not an option because there was no residential opportunities for students of class 11. The colleges had BA and for level of undergraduate studies, right? Not for high school level. So some of my family members in the past, like my great-grandfather's brothers and all, had studied in Aligarh. And I had my mother's aunt and all studied in Aligarh. So there was a kind of, okay, maybe let's look into Aligarh. And there were a bunch of us who were willing to check this out. And so Aligarh AMU had residential opportunities for women students from kindergarten all the way to PhD, engineering, medical, whatever you would study. So for women and men, there were halls in which you would live and you would study and you would grow, in your career. And for women, they were from kindergarten. Kids as young as going to kindergarten school could stay in the boarding house all the way to PhD. So I came in at class 11 along with my sister and few other friends from Assam. And that's how I ended up in Aligarh Muslim University, that you said, minority institution. And I loved Aligarh. Means we were so foreign in Aligarh when we went. As I said, we came from a background where English was almost our first language. We wore skirts and pants. We came from a very composite background. And in Aligarh, people wore shalwar kameez. They spoke Urdu. They ate roti. We were rice eaters, And so all of this is so foreign. And yet it was so familiar. It was this combination that Aligarh has, I think, is unique.
What was the familiarity?
It's just that embracing that even the outsider could be part of this community. As I said, very few institutions even allow young children to come and stay in a boarding setup. Aligarh had the provision. It was able to take care of people. You could be as different or as young or old as you are, but it would take care of you. And I think I instinctively understood that. I understood this relationship that this institution was making with people, that you could be different, but when you are here, you are respected. And we will acknowledge your difference, but we'll also like you to learn something about us.
There's an unusual compassion, which I think the AMU alumni feel for AMU. It's always there.
We love, because the place gives it imbues you with that spirit of well-being and kindness and compassion. And I tell myself, and I tell my other friends, and recently I was talking to another friend in Kuwait who does a podcast, and I said, Sir Syed's ruh lurks in Aligarh. He kind of makes the place a very welcoming place. And Aligarh has a continuity, that has to be said. There's a tradition that continues. That you learn about adab, beginning with adab, that starts every time you see anybody who is a little senior than you. And this does not mean just your provost or your warden or your hall seniors. Even those bhais and babas and bibis who work for you, they're older than you, you say adab first. Right? So as I said, the adab starts with adab. You greet the other. You acknowledge the presence of the other. And even if you see the person 100 times, you wish the person 100 times. You're not indifferent to the presence of the other person. So Aligarh gave me that initial sense of living in a community of many different kinds of people and a kind of enjoyment in that difference, right? Like, say, for example, I'll give you one of the first things that, again, was extremely foreign to us, was the concept of khichura that is served during Muharram on Ashura. We had never had something like this in Assam. In my mother's home, we do maintain Ashura. We are not Shias, but we maintain the first 10 days of Muharram. We don't do, any of the
It was common some few decades ago for even
my Nana's house,
to,
everybody, this is common, I think so. It was a respect for the Prophet's grandsons, right? So we maintained that. And when it came to Aligarh, they said, oh, there's Matam. Would you girls like to go for Matam? And we are like, what is Matam? Okay, Ya Hussein, Ya Hassan, Ya Ali, Ya thing. And we will, of course we'll go. Means we were taught to be very respectful of the Ahle Bayt, right? So we would go, and then they would say there'll be khichura being served. And we thought khichura was really a proper meal, right? And it was a dal soup, like for us.
It's khichda, even at my home, because my wife is from Raebareli, so they make it's like a halim.
Halim, but lighter than
halim.
And in Aligarh, they made it like dal soup.
Dal soup, yeah.
Like, because so many people had to be served. So we were like, this is dinner? Is it? Yeah. Like, this is dinner? We had never thought that this is dinner. So that was one kind of thing. But then you also had, like, we celebrated Holi, we celebrated Diwali dinner, we had Milads in Aligarh that students would organize, the girl students. We know it's a girls' boarding house. They would organize it themselves. And this gave a sense of Christmas. Big Christmas carol and chorus and Christmas party and everything. And it was, everybody enjoyed, because the provost was a Christian woman. So everybody took, pride in the fact that we are respecting Provost Thomas's, celebration. Or there were few Hindu students. So we would go out of our way to make sure that Holi and Diwali dinner were equally grand and good. And Milad was small and students would organize. So Aligarh, without being very conscious of coexistence, created an atmosphere of coexistence. Right? And as I said, with the bhais and bibis and all the small invisible people who did all the work, we're so respected. Means I can go on and on telling you stories of these people who had made a huge difference in my education. Not the classroom education, but the education beyond the classroom, right? The canteen bearers, the library chowkidar, all of them. They were chole wala, the dhobi, the one who used to come and put water in our gharas. All of these were just amazing human beings that I would not forget. At that time, I didn't quite comprehend what lessons I was learning from them, because it's so organic. You're just living it. It's only after I left Aligarh, I realized that the world outside is very harsh to actually people. Here you're in a cocoon in which people are really kind to one another. And like I still remember the Churanwala, old Baba, with a little old broken... I think Aligarh at that time, in our time, and I'm sure people before us and people after us have amazing experiences. And those experiences can only be felt. And that feeling, if you then start to articulate it into an academic language, as I have written about, the language of friendship, friendship between people, friendship between different generations, different class, different gender, different religion. And that friendship is life-giving and life-sustaining.
What is the continuity? How do people of different generations, when they talk about AMU, what is the connecting factor? What is the most, thing that aligns people together?
As my husband Chad says, we all try to just figure out, when were you in AMU, we will say. And the person says, I was there in 1955, say, for example. I know Abdullah Bhai was in 1956, graduate in Washington, D.C. And he'll ask me, when did you graduate from AMU? 1986, 30 years apart. And yet, we like, Abdullah Bhai, do you remember this? And like, of course, aapne ye kiya. We'll start talking about people, places, and then it comes to the culture, right? But as I said, the ruh of Sir Syed is so dominant almost. It's so there. It's so felt, right?
Because you've been saying about the ruh of Sir Syed. Just briefly speaking, what is the ruh of Sir Syed to you?
To me, it's the vision, hope. Sir Syed, the more I started thinking, Sir Syed comes out of a time in incredible devastation of the Muslims, 1857. He came from an aristocratic background, right? His family was, taken care of by the last of the Mughals, right? They were nobility. And yet when 1857 happened and he was a munshi and he was working, he took care of his job. He never said that, I will be... namak halal. He really did, as a colonial servant, he did his job, but he was also very concerned about what was happening, right? So when he came back to take care of his mother, who died a few days after 1857 because she had basically starved, right? During 1857, she was living on horse food for a few days in Delhi where they were stuck and were trying to protect themselves to survive. So Syed did not carry any revenge in his heart. He knew his mother died because of this violence and the condition that was created by the British colonials at that time to oppress and suppress the revolutionaries, but also all the people around that, right? In Delhi, the city of Delhi, and outside entire, what we call the United Provinces, right? So Syed did not think it as a place to sort of take revenge and go after them and destroy whatever ways he could. Rather, he started thinking, how do I build a community that can really take care of themselves? You know, what is needed for the future, not what the past that we left behind. Can we recreate the past? No, he did not linger there. He thought, what is the future we need to build? And how is this future? To build this future, what are the tools we need? And the tool is education. Education in a modern sense, not education in the pre-modern sense, right? So that ruh that I tell you is a ruh of hope, right? He gave a sense that if you take care of yourself and think of a future as a future of possibility, not impossibility, of a possibility. Do not despair and keep civility. Always be civil. Do not lose your adab, right? Keep your civility, dialogue with people, have an open mind, but do the work. You will be able to imagine something beyond the present moment of despair, crisis, devastation, destruction. And he made it happen. He worked with people across the board, right? Whether it was the Chaudhrys and the Zamindars, whether it was the British colonials and the ulama and the Muslim educated people, worked with them and said, let's do some institutional development. It started with little other things and then grew up to be the MAO.
He created a space for belonging in that sense where people can actually connect to the larger community vision and yet be inclusive and interact. And it's maybe a transition towards going out to the larger world and being trained into, dealing with that world, contributing in that world. Yeah,
belonging, or in India we belong, right? Sir Syed never doubted that. He always said, I'm an Hindustani Muslim. I'm a Hindustani Muslim. I belong here. This is home. This is my motherland. Means there is no need to feel that I'm an outsider. I'm not an outsider. Now, how do I contribute to the development of my qawm, myself? I just can't be a crutch for anybody, or nor do I want crutches. I'm a human being and I should be able to help. And in the process, can I also help other people, right? So Aligarh started as a multi-religious space. You know, the first graduate of MAO was a Hindu gentleman, Ishwari Prasad. And there were other kinds of people who came and studied there. He imported a lot of Westerners, British guys, to come and teach in Aligarh because he wanted Aligarh to have MAO, to have that exposure to the world that you're talking about, right? You may be stuck in a small Mufassil town called Aligarh, but the world can come to Aligarh, and Aligarh can be part of a larger world. So that kind of vision is an incredible vision in 19th century when everybody else was despairing, when lamenting that everything has ended.
A vision of building, a vision of...
Yes, and to build something, something has to end.
Yes.
Something ended and we begin again. And we begin with confidence and with struggle, of course. There's a lot of struggle to do. It doesn't happen overnight. And I take that idea of Aligarh as the kind of continuous dream that has survived there. That was Sir Syed's dream, and the Sir Syed's dream survives. And the community of alumni that you're talking about, generations after generations have been churned out of that university, 100 and some years old.
So in some ways, the Seven Sisters and Assam and that, it's at the very periphery of things. And it has a distinct culture. It has its own distinct identity, language, and all of these things. So when you're coming to institution like AMUs, or different groups of people are coming from all directions with all cultures and all ethnicities and coming to this place, how did it change you? How did it evolve you as a person?
See, Assam is also very actually multiple. Northeast is a conglomerate of variety of people. I have written books in which I have basically called it the crossroads and the contact zone of Southeast Asia, South Asia, and even East Asia, right? And then the other kinds of mainland India coming in and all of that. It's very rest of India know the Northeast very little. Now they know it, as you said, because of political reasons and legal issues of citizenship and all of that. But they really do not know the people and the cultures. So when we came in the 1980 to Aligarh, people had no idea. We were like foreigners to them. As I said, we were like strangers, right? But Aligarh is a society of strangers coming together and making a family. As you yourself said, different ethnicities, nationalities, people, religion have come together there. Nobody belongs there, and everybody gets a sense of belonging there. So when I went to school there, and I lived there for 6 years, and I was very, very engaged in Aligarh. I mean, the Aligarh really, as you said, you were asking me how it shaped and thing me. The opportunities that Aligarh gave, first of all, to meet a variety of different people. As I told you, I grew up with multiple different religious communities in Assam, but did not meet multiple groups of nationalities. Right? Now in Aligarh, I would meet Palestinian students, Iraqi students, Fijian students, Iranian students.
So it was that
Somalian
global
students.
At that time?
Yeah, all those, and they all lived in the same hall. Right? We all lived in the same hall. We had different hostels, but it was one compound hall. So Fijian students, I would have never met a Fijian student. Even today, I don't meet Fijian students here in America. We had Fijian students, right? And we don't construct these stories. We thought that these are all like super rich, super wealthy, highly connected people, and hence they are here or something. They were just normal people like you and
very
I,
interesting.
who just came there, right? Somalian. We had close Somalian friends. Syrians, men were always there. There were also other men also were there, but women coming, right? So that exposure gave us a lot of different food. We started experimenting with them. They would cook, we would cook, different hairstyles that they would try out. So that was a very wonderful way of getting to know different cultures. And
cosmopolitan, but at a very local level.
Very local, very lived experience, right? Celebrating like how to wear a Somali, kind of the sarong type dress that they would wear. So it was, Aligarh gave that exposure. Now, because it's all women's hall, you're not competing with, the gender dynamics was not there in that way, that we felt somewhat slighted by the boys, or we had to feel conscious of the presence of the boys or nothing. It was a women's world in which women were really encouraged and given all the opportunities to really succeed. Nobody forced anything on you. Okay, but there were certain kinds of ways in which this was done. So the morning class time was all connected with academic work. Okay, from 8 o'clock classes would start till 12:30. If I remember it correctly, right? 4.5 hours of going to study political science, biology, this, that, whatever you're studying. And then afternoon, after lunch, you would do, Sunni students would go for Sunni theology, Shia students would go for Shia theology, and Hindu and non-Muslim students would have something called Indian civilization and culture. Okay. Then there would be language classes. People like us who never studied.
So no enforcing particular cultures over others.
No, so everybody is given an opportunity to learn their own culture. Hindu students were taught about Hinduism and Indian culture. Muslim students, the Shia students were taught Shiism. The Sunni students would go for Sunni theology. That was one class you would go. These are elective classes, okay? But you had to pass these exams. Otherwise, you would not get your BA degree. But it did not count towards a division, but you had to take the exams and pass. You had to study Urdu, you had to study Hindi, and non-science students had to study a science subject, and science students had to study a humanities thing.
So the
and
electives were
a
at the
foreign
time.
language. On top of that, a foreign language. So by this time, it is 4 o'clock in the evening, right, when classes get over. Then there is either yoga or sports field. You have to go to yoga sport. You can play whatever you want to play. Tennis, ping pong, badminton, whatever. If you go to sports field, if you want to do yoga, you'll go to yoga. I went to yoga classes, right? And so and then classes over, all of this is over. Dinner bell is at 6:30 is dinner. You have to finish your dinner because the bhais and all have to go home. They have homes, and the whole place locks down, right? So this is a routine that is maintained. TV was not a part of our life. Only Wednesday night, Chitrahar was allowed for half an hour.
What's Chitrahar?
Song and dance from Hindi movies.
Oh, okay.
This is a program called Chitrahar, right? And half an hour of song and dance, and you go and you study. You know, it is a routine that keeps a balance. That balance is what I learned in Aligarh. You study, you play, you interact, and food had to be eaten together. You cannot go to your room and eat. You have to come to the dining hall.
It was a mess, dining hall, mess dining hall. We call
Lovely.
it mess. Huh?
Yeah, it's not a mess. It's actually a dining hall where you have tables and chairs, and you are served on porcelain. Yeah, it's very cultured on plates and bowls, and then bhais will come around and serve you, and you will take only one portion of food. You're not allowed do roti, dal, chawal, and something. You know, that is it. It was very simple living, very common shared living. Everybody had to eat together. Everybody shared the meal together. Everybody was aware of. Nobody got anything special. Nobody got anything less. The balance was in everything. So Aligarh taught me not just nationalities and ethnicities and religion as keeping the balance, but food as eating balanced food, and learning to share food with one another, making it a space of conviviality.
Also, AMU is being a minority institution, Muslim minority institution specifically. So it is, and it must be dominated by some level of Muslimness. So, and then there is these different kinds of other religions, people, communities there. So how was the balance between this overarchingly, dominantly Muslim culture and its plurality? So was there a lot of conflict? Because these days it's so much conflict, it's so much feeling as if, these communities do not belong with each other. That's the kind of, the experience that we've been living through for the past decade. How was that? Was that the Muslimness, was it predominantly in a way negating the existence of the other?
Even the words that you're using, Muslimness, are all foreign in Aligarh. We had, I'm honestly telling you, we had Hindu students living with us. Their parents send them to a boarding thing in Abdullah Hall, Women's College, Aligarh Muslim University to study with Muslim students. Those parents also had a very open mind, right? Look at the Hindu parents sending their daughter to Aligarh Muslim University, right? Think of the Christian child, daughter who would come and study there with Muslims. We had all of them, right? Conflict is not even a word that existed there. It was, as I said, conviviality, friendship. Nobody saw, I'm honestly telling you, nobody saw people as different. The Muslimness that you're talking about is not even imposed. We had no place called namaz room. We had no mosque in Abdullah Hall. Boys' hostel, Sir Syed had built one mosque, right? There's one mosque in Aligarh that Sir Syed built. And there, Shias, Sunnis can pray together. There's even a place for women to pray in Sir Syed's mosque that I experienced it only this time when I went to Aligarh. We were not allowed to go to SS Hall, the Sir Syed Hall. So there's one mosque in Aligarh. There's not like, in our time there were 11 halls. 11 halls didn't have 11 mosques. There was one mosque only. Shias, Sunnis, everybody prayed there, and women also had a place to pray. Since we didn't have any mosque, there's no namaz room, nothing. You want to pray, you pray. Nobody comes around, preaches to you. Nobody. But people prayed. People who wanted to pray, prayed. As I said, we used to even have milads and things like that. So conflict was not part of our vocabulary. Our vocabulary is not a Muslimness. It's a kind of, I would say, a cosmopolitan Muslim identity that's steeped in the adab of tolerance and inclusion. That was the culture. You include. You don't make a person feel like they don't belong. Everybody belongs on this thing. So and as I can tell you, in Sir Syed's mosque that he conceived, he thought that Shias and Sunnis should pray together, right? There were no separate prayer place. So what was that? An inclusion? You are all equal. Your students here are all equal.
You told me the other day that you were the president of the Women's College also.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
Oh, I was very active in politics.
Okay.
So I
What were the dominant issues for?
Oh, our dominant issues were very simple. But our dominant issues were also, when we had dominant issues, the way we bargained with the administration, that's what I remember more, was really civil. In Aligarh, everything was very civil. So you disagreed with the administration on something. Like once I remember there was university closure because of a riot in Uppercote, in the main city. The university and the city were very disjointed those days, right? But because there was violence in the city, university had to close down and everybody was told to leave, and it was just closed, right? And so when we returned after, 20 days or whatever number of days, the university sends a bill. It was very cheap, actually, to stay in the hostel. When I was first a student there, it was only 108 rupees. And when I graduated, it was 215 rupees. So it's a very cheap arrangement they had, but they provided everything, as I said. And so we had a lot of very poor students too. There were some very well-off students, like we even had daughters and granddaughters of presidents and things like that studying with us, and so they're very established old Muslim family people were there, but also you had very, very poor Muslim students who would go on scholarship and study there and be there. So now the bill had arrived and they didn't have the money to pay, and so that was one of the issues that I had to deal with as a president, is remission for the boarders of the fees who should not be charged for not staying in the hostel and asked to pay the fee for living in the hostel dues. And of course, the university was very reluctant initially and said that, no, this is, everything has to continue and you cannot get these privileges. But it was very civil. The discussion was very civil. And then we said, okay, if you don't listen to our demands, we are doing a hunger strike, right? And so, because the food costs money, we are doing a hunger strike. So we did a hunger strike. And everybody was so sad that these little girls were doing a hunger strike for the little, whatever, 50 rupees or something to save their friends from paying. They came around and they said, we, of course, not only agree, we want to take care of you very well. And they came and pleaded with us, our professors, our provost, our administration, that, "Bache, please have your food and then we'll talk." We said, "No, you first sign this piece of paper, then we will." And they did. And they were like parent figures. They understood. Although I think the university had taken a huge cut because of losing money from the borders for such a long time. But they understood and they did it. So I really respect that kind of politics where there was a lot of civility and concern and compassion. They were more concerned that the kids were starving rather than the kids were bargaining and, kind of being, protesting, right? Protest was seen as, it was so different. It was not politicized in the sense of how dare they stand up against us. Rather, we should really take care of these kids. And this continued. Then I was pretty active in the debate circle in Aligarh. So there were some students, and again in the politics, some students were discollegiated because they don't come to class as often, or they have home issues at home. These are day scholars, right? They have home issues, and again fighting with the administration for that. And there was just Syed Hamid used to be the vice chancellor, and he was very kind, and he invited us to his house to listen what the problems are for the students who are not allowed to take exam. And I was in the forefront fighting for these students. So yeah, I was very involved, and I think it was not involved in the sense that I was thinking that I was doing politics. It was more involved in the sense that this is my place too. The students also, how do I explain? It's like a home. Like, this is my home too. I should be allowed to have a voice here. And I will voice and I will talk about these issues. And I did it. And I think people encouraged. They encouraged people to do so. So there were lots of people like me. And I was a senior hall. In Aligarh, a very big honor that you can have is to be the senior hall of your hall, right? One person is chosen to be the senior hall, who is considered kind of an exemplary student at that time, right? So I was a senior hall in my time in 1986. And so it was a very beautiful moment for the administration to also recognize that, this non-Urdu speaking Assamese woman is a girl, is involved and so engaged or whatever. We should select her to be the senior hall. And that Aligarh gave me so much that I can never compensate. It's always paying forward. I was the best student. I did very well. I was a good student, and I should not boast about it. I was a good student right from high school. I could have studied whatever I wanted to study. I really deliberately chose history. And so people thought I was doing history to be to take the IS exams or something. I was totally against it, and I never did. I refused. Or because I'm joining politics or doing political work, so I'll be part of some political, party or something. I never did those things for that. It was just fun to be doing those things in Aligarh. And so that, however, paved the way or gave me a sense of, I suppose now when I reflect on it, a confidence that I don't think any other institution could have provided. Yeah. With JNU is probably a very dynamic place. But I honestly, as an Aligarhian, would say, I don't think my husband, who's an American, would certainly say, if you talk to him, that Aligarhs are very different from any other people he has.
Yeah, I agree. I was just giving because I don't myself feel that much about even Jamia, JNU, even because I've never studied in AMU, but I saw that this level of belonging, even that campus also creates to a lot of.
Hence I say it's the ruh. It has an energy that you cannot.
So you did history from there?
I studied history.
Bachelor's or master's also?
I did bachelor's and master's.
And master's. And then you moved on to United States.
My mother comes from administrative, her family comes from an administrative background, right? So she had this thing that, you should be an those days were ICS in her time, right? In the colonial service. But IS exam, I said, absolutely not. I'm going to be a academic. And so she was kind of...
Why not IS?
I think it's a great job for some people. It was not for me. It was not for me. And I didn't believe... as I said, I did very well in exams. So exams didn't fascinate me so much. Right? Passing another exam and getting a job was not the way I saw myself growing. So anyhow, but I had just returned to Assam, and my mother said, you should stay here for a little time. And so we have a college in Guwahati called Cotton College, which is now Cotton University, and it is a government institution and it's supposed to be the cream of the cream in a Cotton College kind of stuff. So my mother went and filled up a form without letting me know that I was going to take the interview for the Public Service Commission appointment to be an academic, right? So she told me, you have an interview call on so-and-so date. And I did go to the interview, and I got the nomination to be a Cotton College professor my MA results had not even come out. And without the first shot, I was the youngest person ever hired in Assam's Public Service Commission for academic appointment, right? So I started there for 1 year. In the meantime, I started applying to go abroad. My mother said, no more Aligarh. You either take the IS or something. My father said, go abroad. Your mother is not going to let you go to Aligarh. You better try to go abroad. So I applied, and I got my admission in Oxford. I was supposed to go to Oxford. And I also had a fellowship from them, but it was not a large enough fellowship.
Oh, to cover costs.
To cover all the costs. So I was given an award by the late Rajiv Gandhi as one of the brilliant new youth in India. So he had invited a few of us to come meet him. And so he then asked us what we wanted. I told him, he asked different people, and some people said, there were 10 or I don't know how many number of us, a small group of people. And I said, see, I have my admission in Oxford. Can your government help me compensate for the difference? And he said, yes, surely, we'll definitely help. Come to my office tomorrow. And Sheila Dixit used to be the secretary, and she said, you come to the office and we'll sit down. And she said, but you really don't need a fellowship. Your parents are well off and this and that. I said, but that's too much. What they're offering me and what my parents can actually do, there's a vast difference. I'll come tomorrow. In the meantime, there was one other student from Delhi University who was also invited to this special gathering. And he was a Sindhi student. He drove his own car. I still remember, I cannot remember his name, came from a business family. And he told me, why do you want to go to Oxford? Go to America. I'm like, why would I go to America to study? They don't do history, Indian history. He said, no, go, that's the place where it is. I said, why don't you go to study? He said, no, I come from a big business family and they will never let me go and get a PhD.
Oh, okay.
I've come this far, that is enough. So you go. And I came back home. This was sometimes in September, October or something in 88. And I came and I said, I'm applying to go to the US, right? And my father said, okay, do whatever. So I wrote. And then the professor I wrote to here, handwritten letter, he writes back to me in 14 days or 20 days or whatever, and says, why do you want to come to America to study, to do a PhD? You are studying in Aligarh Muslim University, the Center of Advanced Studies in History. You should study there. I said, no, I'm not. Anyway, this went on and I ended up here. So, but because Aligarh, when I was in the batch, what was called PUC, pre-university certificate or whatever, which is class 11. We didn't have class 12. So I did class 11 and then 3 years and 2 years. So I did not have 16 years that you need
formal education.
For formal education. I had 15 years of formal education. So I had to do another MA.
Okay.
In America.
In America. Yeah.
And I did American history. So I studied American history as my first MA. And when I was doing American history, I wrote a thesis on a race riot in Philadelphia. A black woman during the First World War I, 1917, she was a municipal officer and she had reached a middle class status as far as income, and she moved her family to a middle class white neighborhood in Philadelphia, and immediately a race riot broke out. A black woman, a black family was not allowed to live with white people. Racial segregation. You can be income-wise middle class, but you cannot be socially middle class. Racially, you cannot be middle class. And I wrote this thesis that won an award. But it shook me. I said, I have come to America to study about American history and do something, and this country still cannot accept people as equal? What is this? I thought in India we had caste. In India we had all these differences. I didn't know America was also steeped in this hierarchy of race and difference. And I said, I can't continue to be studying American history because I will never be able to speak honestly about what is the problem here. Right? And I was very young, so I didn't have the confidence to critique a country that says that all men are equal, or we are for freedom or liberty and equality, and there's actually, in practice, there's no equality. So then I moved back to South Asia. And
studying South Asia?
And I started studying South Asia again. That's how.
One of the interesting things, because you spoke about your experience in AMU, which does not have a lot of understanding of conflict between different communities, and these kinds of things.
Or they protected us from it.
And then the first thing that you do when you go out in America is to study a conflict. So why did that happen? Why are you? And then when you're coming back and then you're reading South Asia, again, a lot of what you're doing and what you're studying is conflict and belonging. So how does your belonging and your protected environment and everything and not feeling othered, and the moment you step out and that is what you choose to study?
See, the American system of education or the graduate classes were very different from what I was used in back in India. I was not in the semester system, right? We were the year-long kind of courses that you did and took an exam, MA exam. Here when I came, the semester system itself was very strikingly different to me, and everything had to move at a very fast pace. I really thought I could not continue. Although I was, as I said, a very good student, I thought I can't do this because this is very different. And classes here my first encounter was, it's not run the way it's done in India. Nobody comes and lectures to you anything. You're given books, you're given a syllabus, and you're told we are having a discussion on this and this. And you just show up in class, people are just sitting around like this, and a conversation is going on, and yet people seem to know what to find as the other important issues that they should know about. What is a theory that they should actually be speaking to? Who is this book dialoguing with? What is this author's own genealogy in education and all? People seem to know and be able to have this conversation fluidly. And I was like waiting for somebody to tell me all of this, right? So I didn't quite initially get it. I still remember my first class was a Russian history class. I had studied Russian back in Aligarh as a language also. So then I took alongside, I had taken a course on pre-colonial America, and then, colonial America. And then there was a course on slavery. And I think the slavery course really made me start thinking about the injustices that were done to human beings just because they were of a different color. Okay? We didn't use the word African American, it was mostly black, African American, those kind of. In India, we had very negative words, right, to describe black American people and things like that, which we don't use anymore, the N word, right? So even that was shocking to me, that people in India are talking about them in the N word, like what the colonials have spoken about. And here we come, and here actually people are writing books about this oppression that they have meted on the people here, like white scholars are writing how horrific slavery was. And I became very fascinated that there was a capacity to investigate the truth and to speak truthfully, that history could speak the truth of the past, right? And so I became very interested in the Black story, right? Black story in America. And how did the Blacks survive here despite the dehumanization? I didn't think I was studying conflict. It was just, as you now put it, I was studying race, and I was trying to understand race relation, right? And the race relation was through the story of this woman, as I said, who became socially pariah, but was economically middle class, right? And other Black people suffered because of her audacity to move into a white neighborhood. Like later on, Obama writes about audacity of hope to be treated like a human being, right? I didn't think of it as a conflict. I was just studying American history and trying to understand race relation. Now that you put it, conflict story, I still don't study conflict. I don't see my work as studying conflict. I see my work as trying to understand the possibility of becoming better human beings.
But part of it, the subject matter is that the different races, different castes, different religions, they end up, in a relationship of turmoil and, difference and dehumanization. So it's, in a certain way, the subject matter is embedded within some level of conflict. Although you're not directly reading the conflict, you're reading the relationships that are, emerging in these kinds of settings.
Yes, if you pull it out and you do it that way, I would say. But when I returned to South Asian history and did my MA in South Asian history, and it became my first, again I did an MA because I had to do an MA now in South Asian history.
So you have 3 MAs?
I have 3 MAs. I have an MA from Aligarh.
Triple MA.
And then an American history and then a South Asian, because American history now counted as a minor in my graduate studies, right? It became a minor field. My major field is now South Asia, and I have to prove that I can write in South Asia. And those days, Madison, Wisconsin, the system of things that you had to write an MA thesis in order to get your MA degree. Things have changed again. Now you just do an exam, right? So you have to have an MA thesis.
A dissertation and a thesis.
As a thesis, we call it thesis here. MA is a thesis and PhD is a dissertation. So I had to write an MA thesis in South Asia. I had done an MA thesis in American history. So now to do an MA. So I didn't continue coursework. All I had to do was write a thesis. That thesis became my first book. Okay, it's all on medieval documents of 13th to around, I don't think they're 13th century documents, although they're said to be 13th century. I date them from around 16th to 19th century from Assam. There's no conflict in there. These chronicles that I translated and then wrote a whole analysis of these 6 chronicles, they talk about relationships happening, developing, changing, transforming both the place and the people of Assam. In those manuscripts, in those documents, no community is named by their religion or by their ethnicity. They are named sometimes by ethnicity and based on the skill, okay? But they're not ethnicized as a separate people, right? In the chronicles, the people are referred to as we, always as we. In the original pre-Assamese chronicles, they are called we. And when they're done in Assamese, it is also called ami. There's us. Us and the king, us and the ruler. Okay? And who is the us? The us is a constantly growing group of people. There are Chutias, Kocharis, Ahoms, Manipuri, Kuch, Musalman, Hindu, Bamun, Brahmin, all this constitutes us, and they are all the subjects of the Swargadevas, the Swargadev, we call Swargadev, right? The Ahom king. And those chronicles gave me the idea that this we is the foundation of actually Assam, the myriad of people that I was telling you in the beginning of this discussion. That the variety that actually the chronicles talk about, you see in the 20th, 21st century. That all made that place their home, right? So that became my MA thesis. Now, it was in my PhD work when I went to do, again, now the study. Okay, these chronicles, I studied them as artifacts of the past. And what has the past tells us about community, right? So when I went to study, because these chronicles are written, original chronicles are written in a language called Thai Ahom. Thai Ahom is connected to Lao script, like this document that I have here, this chronicle that I have here, and the vocabulary has a lot of Thai in it. So in Madison, Wisconsin, I had to study Thai in order to understand some of the vocabulary of these chronicles, and I had to study Lao in order to read the script. So now I have studied these languages, and I go to Assam to want to study these chronicles with people who have these original manuscripts. So when I contacted a priest of this community, Ahom community, who was identified as a last authentic priest of this community by an anthropologist from Germany. So I went and met him in 1992, and I said, I want to study these chronicles with you. And I am not an Ahom, Hindu Ahom. Okay? I am from the same world and the same clan of Ahom people, but we are Muslim Ahoms in a way, one can call, because we were included in the nobility, right? From my father's side of the family. So when I was staying in the village, I didn't know that this priestly village is also considered to be the hotbed of something called the United Liberation Front of Assam. Ulfa. Right? And I would go from place to place, this person's house to that person's house and whatever. And then when I would come back to the city, to Sipsagar, my father's family being from there, the MPs and all of them, and the politicians, is that they will say, I believe you'll stay in the Ulfa Den. I'm like, what Ulfa Den are you talking about? I don't know anything about this. And they're like, no, you're staying in Ulfa Den. They almost started sort of thinking I would be a mass messenger to bring things, what's happening in these places, to come and tell them. And these are politicians. These are big people. So
what year is this?
This is 94.
94.
And 94, 95, right? And including Yasmin Saikia, who was then the chief minister, and a close friend. I should know him since I was a little kid. So
Saikia?
Yasmin Saikia.
So he has the same surname as you?
Yeah, as I said, we have Ahom nobility. No. This Ahom nobility. They're Hindu. We are the only Muslim Saikias. And I can tell you the history of my family in a more elaborated way if you are interested. So Hitesh uncle would call me to his home and tell me, what do you know? So I had to finally tell him, you're the chief minister of Assam. You know more than I do. I'm just hanging around and reading books with these people, right? But it is in that time that I realized that people were actually using history to construct a new identity. And this identity was in circulation for the benefit or for making certain kinds of demands of either secessionism, transnationalism, and also perhaps Assamese regionalism, right? The Thai people, you would come, and they would also have this powwow with people and discuss about how to make the Ahoms more Thai-like. I would be invited to Thailand to come give talks. There would be, other kind of what we would consider today anti-government people who would show up and would share material and this and that. Take this with you, please circulate. I'm like, I'm not doing any of this stuff. I have come here to study. But then when I was writing this thesis and writing my dissertation, I brought all of that story into it, that how history has become a tool and an instrument and an object for people to circulate it for different purposes, right? And why are they doing this? Because these Ahom, who were the rulers of Assam for many hundreds of years, are now considered totally otherized, like they're tribal, uncivilized, lower than the Brahminic Hindus, right? And so they were trying to themselves assert a place and claim what I'd say a dignity by saying, we are not like you, we are not you, we are different from you, recognize us for who we are. So that's when my work became more geared towards something in the present. What does history mean in the present?
So talk about this. Just before partition, after partition, how is the Assamese identity forming? Very briefly.
Now we're getting into historical intellectual question, not the personal biographical story. The Assamese, now if you look at what is an Assamese, it is not a given group of people. It is groups of people who are Assamese. The word Assamese comes into currency when the word Ahom is dropped off the lexicon of Assam's administrative documents. And this happens in 1931 when the British drop off the word Ahom and consider all of these people are Assamese. Now, but there's no group called Assamese in the text. As I said, it's a us, we, something, right? There's no Assamese, Ami. So who is the Assamese is in an economic way. If you look at economic history, you find that the Assamese were the subject groups that the British could extract revenue from. They were the ones who were living along the Brahmaputra and were cultivators. The people that they could not really make them into subjects, they called them by their tribal names. They made them hill tribes, right? So you have multiple hill tribes. Now the Assamese is a conglomerate, people who had settled along the Brahmaputra. They're Hindus, they're Muslims, they're Christians, they're all kinds of people. So they are mostly agriculturalist people. Now this had gone on from, say, for example, I would say from the early 1900s, there's an awareness. The first Assamese association was born in Calcutta, Ahom. Basically, it's a literary organization, right? In 1892, I think it came into existence in Calcutta, where they started then talking about Assamese. But there's the way this is also happening is there's a shift from Upper Assam or Eastern Assam, where the Ahom kings ruled, which is Jorhat, Sipsagar, that area, Brahmaputra Valley, to Guwahati and Kamrup, which the British had identified as their administrative area. Now the British shifted, just like thinking if you think of Delhi and Calcutta, how the British shifted, Delhi was the capital of the Mughals, and had all the center of power was there. Now the British shifted it to Calcutta for the longest time, and Delhi dwindled away. Right? It became the thing of the past. It's something like that with Assam. They made the historic Assam absolutely irrelevant and then made the commercial Assam of Guwahati their main place from where so everybody then congregated there, and people who became little officers, clerks in this British system started studying and having the opportunity of scholarship and this and that. This is also a time, as far as my historical reading goes, is a time when they started inventing a story that Assam is not peripheral to India. Assam is not an uncivilized place. It is not the place of Yavanas and Asuras. It is the place of Aryavrata in a way, right? Mahabharata is part of this story here. There's certain kinds of scholars who started doing this work, and they were all from this other western part of Assam with Guwahati as the center. It is not the eastern Assam.
How are they connecting it to the Mahabharata then?
Through the war, the Kiratas and this and that. Then there is this one book started to be written. As you said, during the 1940s, books were written in the sense that the so-and-so king who is considered a Danav or a Asura is not actually in that sense, but he was part of this other group, of the Pandava group. Of the Mahabharata, the Pandavas and Kauravas, right? He's part of the Kaurava group. And his thing is originally Bihar and this and it's fanciful writing.
So it became like so now this is just not Pandavas and Kauravas, they have their allies, and their allies, some of the allies are from Assam. And so that's why we are part of this larger narrative, which is part of the larger nation.
Yes, and this is happening in 1940s. 1940s. Once the British made Assam, the Assamese, the word it brought into currency. 1931, they brought it into currency, and suddenly, with, as I said, with education and all of that, the hub of now all the administrative work is in Guwahati, and all the people who are in that Kamrup Guwahati area getting the opportunity to study in Calcutta, or going to Oxford or wherever, coming back and then writing these story of sacred Assam. It is no longer regal Assam, royal Assam of the Ahoms. Those have been made into tribals, right? Now there's a sacred Assam geography. And the sacred geography of Assam is connected to sacred India.
A lot of confusion is also like this. So Bengal, before 1947, includes Bangladesh. And so the larger idea of Bengal included this idea of this geography also. And after 1947, and in that Assam is also somehow, because of the movement of people, is largely one geography. And immediately after the partition, there are two kinds of movements. One is relatively slower, the Hindutva or the RSS getting into...
No, don't mix it. Bengal is different from Assam. And I'm not just talking about this language rivalry between Assamese and Bengali. Assam was never part of that geography. Hence, people could make up whatever, in a way, the stories they wanted to. They tried, this is a project of the 1940s and 50s. Once they started going to Calcutta and also study, people came back with the idea that, my God, we are not civilized enough. Look at the Hindus elsewhere. We are hanging around with these tribals. We are talking to Christians. We are letting these missionaries come and we should now become. And what had happened also, geography is not simply the geography of disconnect, but the geography of also the environment is very important to know here. As I said, Brahmaputra is the lifeline of Assam, right? There were major earthquakes. Assam is in the earthquake belt, okay? So 1937, as far as I know, there were probably other big earthquakes. 37, there was a big earthquake, and my great-grandfather was affected by that earthquake, so I know it from a family story, right? 1950, there was another big earthquake. Okay, in Assam, and Brahmaputra even changed the course. I had asked people when talking of 47, that why didn't you guys migrate from here when you were doing Muslim League? Some of them were doing Muslim League, right, during that time. Why will we go? This is home. And for them, partition was irrelevant. Brahmaputra had changed the course after earthquake, and that was for them very significant change. Brahmaputra's life is their life. When Brahmaputra does something, people are, because they live along the Brahmaputra. They're agriculturalists. They're people who have the bread and butter coming out of that, fertile plain of Brahmaputra. So during these earthquakes, that is when the RSS started infiltrating. Nobody else in India paid any attention to what was happening to our people in Assam. In the 37 earthquake.
Interestingly, Muslim League is also there.
Yeah.
Like RSS.
Yeah.
In a sense, I mean, this Muslim League is also expanding towards, which is periphery.
Muslim League is there, but it's a different kind of Muslim League. And I'm sorry, I did not do any of the research with people I should have done who participated in Muslim League, right? Because now they're dead and gone, right? So did not do that. And so I can't really say what drove them, but I've tried to narrate from the children and their grandchildren, try to find out what actually brought them to Muslim League and what were they doing. And we can go into these histories endlessly. I think the curriculum was similar. You see, I asked my father, what did they study when they were in school? And they said, as students, Muslim students, were to study Persian and Arabic in the government schools. Right? And they had English. And then he went on to Presidency College and then went on to Dhaka University and then came back, did his PhD. My father is the first PhD in biochemistry in Assam.
Oh, interesting.
He came back from Bombay with his biochemistry degree. And so I asked him so then I asked some of his contemporaries who are here in America, from say Karachi and places like that, and what did you guys study? And they studied the same. Curriculum was the same. And I think because the curriculum was the same, they could connect, although the languages may be different and they're disparate people, they could connect. And so the Muslim League or in Sibsagar area where my father was from, it was a Praja Socialist Party. So they were all part of Praja Socialist Party. In Sibsagar, the Muslim League did not have any inroad. In Jorhat, where my mother is from, their Muslim League had an inroad, okay? But the main inroad was in Dibrugarh, which was actually a colonial city where basically the train ended there. And many of the people from North India had moved there for colonial commercial purposes. And I think they may have had an impact in developing Muslim League in that town. Because they were Urdu-speaking people who had migrated there for businesses. And then they had friends and family and they got married locally and maybe those people became part of Muslim League. But Sibsagar, which is the capital of the Ahom kingdom, was not in the Muslim League politics nor in Congress politics. They were Praja Socialist Party. And for the longest time, Sibsagar actually elected a CPM person to the State Assembly, right? And even today, you have Okhil Gogoi being elected from Sibsagar. BJP is not able to win there. Congress doesn't win there. It is the local Krishak party, right? Peasants. So Sibsagar is very different. It was a royal capital. It had a very different sense of a cosmopolitanism and a very strong sense of identity as Assamese that is not divided by religion.
So the thing I wanted to understand was, so there's this movement, an idea of civilizationally connecting this geography with the mainland.
This is happening after partition.
After partition. Similarly, there is this movement based on language and being Assamese in the 60s. So these,
I think they're two competing forces, the 50s and 60s.
Yes, that's what I want to go at. So these are two competing forces, which is creating two competing identities. And one identity dominated for like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s maybe, where language and ethnicity.
No, it did not. This is what I'm trying to say. There are two valleys now. Brahmaputra Valley was competing with Brahmins and the Shankariyas. Okay, among the Hindus, there was that competition. Muslims are now, let's keep them aside as another sidebar, we'll talk later. Barak Valley, which is connected to Surma Valley, that became part of Sylhet in 1947. After the referendum of 1946, Sylhet said they'll be part of East Pakistan, right? So in 47, they're part of, so this side of the valley, Barak Valley, became part of Assam. It had a very large Muslim population, okay? Now, also the Bengali speaking. And after 47, a lot of people from the Surma Valley, Sylhet and other places started migrating to Barak Valley. Hindus started migrating. This is when the language movement happens in the 60s, Assamese versus Bangla. The RSS gives full support to the refugee Bengalis from East Pakistan who had now settled in Barak Valley. So they tried to infuse religion into the language crisis. So Brahmaputra Valley versus Barak Valley. Brahmaputra Valley is Assamese speaking, Barak Valley is Bengali speaking. Brahmaputra Valley is cosmopolitan in its attitude. Barak Valley is divided because they had partition. Don't forget, right? Surma Valley and Barak Valley. So people had to go both sides. So they carry these memories of losing home, becoming refugees, is that. And so when they come to India and the RSS that has been working for disaster management, for the earthquake disaster management from the late 30s, 50s, all of along, now they found a foothold in the Barak Valley refugee, Bengali refugee community to say, we are your saviors against the Assamese. Right? So they saved the Barak Valley Hindu community. They could not get into the Assamese politics yet, the RSS.
Yes.
They could not yet get into because the Assamese had this memory of some kind of togetherness, right? That was not yet being divided up. And because they themselves had the infighting between the Brahminic and the Shankariya group, they could not resolve their problem, right? So 60s went like that, with language crisis. When 70, the Assam movement started by the students saying our whole state is now being taken over by outsiders. Who is the outsider they meant was basically the businessmen, the Marwaris, who were controlling business, but from Dibrugarh, that area that I told you about, all the way to Guwahati, tea plantation.
So the Marwaris came from which?
Rajasthan.
Rajasthan.
Mostly Calcutta Marwaris and Rajasthani Marwaris, and a lot of Biharis came with them to be their workers.
Historically speaking, at what point of time?
I think these came with the British, the colonial time, and then post-colonial. They kept coming. Now, when India was created, they felt that they can now establish themselves. The Assamese are not business people. Now we have a place we can go do business. And they started with small stores because our big industry was tea industry and the oil industry, right? So the tea plantations were still run by the Brits post-independence, and there were a lot of Indians in it. Tea industry has a very different lifestyle. It's a very Western lifestyle, right? So they need, say, their cakes and pastries, and they need their wines, and who is going to bring it? So the Marwaris, who had all these connections, would bring it to Assam. You have to have capital, right? Assamese people didn't have capital for all this business. So the Marwaris started creating these small stores that would take care of basically tea people's needs, both from the level of the laborers' needs all the way to the higher managerial staff's needs, right? So by the 70s, late 70s, the people started feeling that we are not getting anything out of being part of India. Right? We need to agitate and we need to demand that we don't even have proper train service. Like when I went to college to Aligarh, we didn't even have broad gauge train. We had to change train in Bengal-Assam border and then take meter gauge train. Right? We had one airport only. We had two medical colleges, because my father was a biochemistry professor. So we had very little, but as I said, life was simple. I started by telling you, life was simple, but life was very beautiful because people knew one another. Suddenly there were all these new people who were dominating and were really were doing very well. So the students started agitating, saying, we want to protect our land. We want these outsiders to go away. This is that RSS that has been working from 1950s, 44. They established their first shakha in 1944. And since then, by the 1979, now they've been working for nearly 50 years in Assam, right? With the pracharaks, they now start infusing the students, saying that your fight is not against the Marwari businessmen. Your fight is against these Muslims who have come from Bangladesh. Bangladesh had just happened in 1971. These are the people who are taking your land and your identity and diluting your Assamese identity. And that was very well orchestrated by some of the Assamese who were part of the RSS from the beginning. They had joined, although it was a banned organization, right? They had joined this organization. They were doing all kinds of social work. They were starting all these schools, hospitals, banks, local banks, this, that, other. So they started almost poisoning these young men and these young guys said, we have suddenly become very important. They're paying attention to us, what we're doing. And that's when the RSS came in and the movement changed from the language issue to that of a religion. In the beginning, they didn't say it was religion, but now we know it's anti-Muslim.
When the CA movement happened, and because I was a student at that time and I saw it closely, the NRC issue had already taken shape long back in the Assamese context. And what we were listening to all the time, the Assamese issue is different. It's about language. It's not about ethnicity. It's not about religion. It's language, ethnicity. It's not religion. But a few years after that, especially the new chief minister and everything, so it really has become explicitly religious. But you're saying that it was religiously motivated, or infusion was happening even then, but it was not part of the public expression.
Nobody was really talking, because when Nelly mass devastation, I was a student at Aligarh, 83, right? My mother and all were very involved my mother was very involved in social work. So they were very involved in helping destitute people. But in our own home, my parents would have incredible arguments about this. My father said it cannot be that Assamese people would be doing this. He came from the Sipsagar world, where everything was, very different. And my mother said, this has been orchestrated here. This does not come from anywhere outside. And I was in Aligarh, I didn't know what was happening. And now when I look back at it, there was no inquiry being made. Nobody was punished. And now it is proven by scholars that it was actually the local tribal people were used by the RSS to go out on a rampage against the Bengali cultivators. So it was there. It is now people are taking credit. Now that we have the BJP government in power and they're doing very well, they're taking credit that we were the people who made the initial link between the Assamese student group and the AVPP or the VHP, not the VHP, AVPP and the RSS. RSS members, Assamese members are now taking credit that we were the people who did it, right? But those days they kept it all hushed. It was still not a religiously driven movement. The religion was infused into the movement. It was not religiously driven. And then came Ulfa. Ulfa took it completely out of the context of all this religion basis and said, we don't trust any Indians. You be Hindu, you be whatever, Muslim, you are whatever you are, we don't trust Indians, we want our own place. So they shifted it for a little bit of time, way back from, not language, and Assamese chauvinism, regionalism. And what is this Assamese regionalism was never really explored. It became violent, and so people, became anti-Ulfa. But Ulfa continued to say that nobody is an outsider here. You adopt Assamese as your language, you live in Assam, you are a new Assamese. We include everybody, there's no religious difference and distinction. So Ulfa did try in a very, half-baked way to bring back the sense that you can be a composite community. But because of violence, the local people lost interest in Ulfa because of violence, but also that made them very vulnerable.
So, Dr. Saikia, so all of this ethnicity, religion, region, language, all of this ends up creating a reality for Muslims in Assam. And they become the ultimate niche of, the other, the final other. How do you see that?
Assamese the Muslims of Assam, have come to Assam in multiple different ways, okay? And they're as old as, in fact, the Ahoms will tell you that the Muslims were here before us, okay? So from around, say, late 1190s, when the Delhi Sultanate was formed, there were a lot of renegade generals, right, who did not become subjects of the Delhi Sultanate and moved eastward from Bengal, and then some of them from Bengal to Assam. And so one of them was Bakhtiyar Khalji, and he had won, and then the local man called Ali Mech. Mech is a tribal community. He converted to Islam. So that is an indigenous root of Islam in Assam. And then there are other kinds of royal families that had also converted.
This is 11th century.
late 12th, early 13th century.
Early 13th century. Yeah.
All right. So had converted. So as soon as it was formed in India, mainland India, I'm trying to say that Islam had also come to Assam. Same time.
Maybe in a smaller group of
people, also local conversion had started happening, but there are waves of them going on, okay? And let's not go to all of it, but there are a lot of settlements happening through just people moving there, itinerant people, Sufis, dervishes, teachers, traders, and also military. So there are many different ways of them coming in. Now, the story that is usually said that, we had sort of, we were a bastion against the Mughals, and we defeated the Mughals in the Battle of Saraighat called 1671. Fictitious story. Yes, there was a battle. Yes, the Ahoms won, but the Ahom won also with the help of the Muslim generals and the Muslim commanders and the Muslim artillery and the troops. But today they whitewash all of it, and they say that one Lachit Borfukan is the only guy, and he fought against the Mughals because the Ahoms were fighting against Muslim invasion. There was nothing like that in history, in the chronicles that I study, and they were written contemporaneously, they were written at that time. None of these kind of stories are being told, right? The Muslims also came by invitation to the Ahom royal family, right? Because once the Ahom started interacting with other groups of Indians through war or through other conflicts or through emissaries being sent, they needed to upgrade themselves. They could not continue in Thai and Thai languages that nobody else in India used. They had to use Persian. They had to use Sanskrit. So they started importing Brahmins, and they started importing people who could read Persian. So some families of Muslims were imported, and they're written about in the chronicles. My mother's family is one of those families that were imported in the late 17th, early 18th century to Assam. My father's family came to Assam. That I don't know where they were brought from. Rajeshwar Sinha brother. My father's family is recorded in a copper plate inscription. They came from Delhi. And I think that they were Sufis. His name is Sheikh Azimuddin. Sheikh Azimuddin was given the title of Saikia, said that he's a grandson. So his grandfather had come, I think. He was a grandson in 1604. He was given the title of Saikia with a copper plate inscription. And in marriage, an Ahom royal woman, noble woman, land in perpetuity, and so much people under his thing and this like that. So these people were welcomed and settled in Assam. They just did not just, kind of...
as part of the interest of the Ahom kingdom, for them to connect linguistically.
And I think they brought some skills with them. The skills were very important, right? So skills of masonry, architecture, engineering, revenue administration, agricultural techniques. They brought some skills.
It's like in America, you get an O1 visa, EB1 visa because you have special skills, and then you get a green card, and then you're Americanized, and so it's something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So you are welcome. You are actually asked to settle there, rather than some infiltrators. So this story goes on. For a lot of Muslim families can trace, but in my case, I'm very fortunate. I actually have a historical document and a historical artifact that says so-and-so has been given this title, settle here, this, that, other. So this is a Muslim family that was included by the royalty, right? And then, so there are many others probably like that. But this goes on in the Ahom kingdom. Now, what happens when the Ahom kingdom ends in 1826 and the British take over that place? From 1838, the British actually run the administration of Assam. For 10, 12 years, they did not run it. They had left it in the hands of the Ahom, just like how they had done with Bengal, right? After Battle of Plassey, they didn't take over immediately. It is after the Battle of Buxar in 1764 that they take over the Diwani and the administration. They took the Diwani first. They didn't take the administration. Same thing they've done in Assam. They take over the place, but they don't control it. They only take the revenue, right? And they leave. By 1838, they take the whole place. Now, when they take this whole place under their control, they realize that this place has a lot of potential, but there are not enough people. So one is they developed the potential of tea cultivation. So now they need tea workers. So they started importing Adivasis from central India to come and work in these tea plantations, right? Because the Assamese people were not going to work as laborers in some other colonial servant, they will not be. Oil industry, likewise, they even brought Chinese to Assam to work in the oil industry. And as I said, the Marwaris and all had also started shifting now to Assam because there is the development of industries, and industries need, like whether it is people to help repair some machine or to bring in food for the people, to transport grains, this, that, whatever. Now they also realize, the British realize, oh, we are just importing food. We are not having enough food to feed these laborers. So we need new people to come to Assam to grow more food. So they start telling Bengalis of East Bengal that time, because now you are in 1900, particularly after partition of Bengal, they say you go to Assam and there's a lot of land and we need to sort of grow more food there, rice, because we have now growing industry, right? And we have a lot of people. We are bringing people who are producing oil and working in the oil factories and oil drilling and in the tea plantation. Tea does not produce food. Tea is a beverage. Now you have to feed those workers that you have brought in. So now they attracted Bengali peasants to come to Assam. So the Bengali peasants who come to Assam, they're coming because they have no other avenue of getting land for themselves in Bengal that is controlled by completely Bengali Hindu zamindars, right? So these people come here and they are settled along the swampy areas of Assam. So a population of Bengali peasants grow, right? So now you have the old Muslim families, as I'm talking about, who have a very distinct kind of connection with the Ahom nobility. And then you have the Bengali peasants. And in between you have some Biharis and this and that who have come to work in the colonial places. So there are two groups of Muslims in Assam, and they don't connect. They do not connect. So when the 79 Assam agitation happens and the movement is taken in the direction of anti-Bengali, the Assamese Muslims are upset about it, but they don't know these people. They never married there's no question of marriage. They've never interacted with these people. There are people live in Lower Assam, Eastern Assam, what we call Eastern Assam. They're cultivators. They speak a different language. They've come from a different place. Although they have come around 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940. But by 1979, 1980, you're suddenly like, oh, we don't know these people. But they are a bigger group. The Barak Valley Muslims have been there for a long time. But Brahmaputra Valley and Barak Valley don't share a language. Assamese Muslims don't share a language with Bengali Muslims. So you have then you have the class difference among the Muslims, right? The educated, the uneducated, this, that. So being a Muslim in Assam is a very nuanced identity, to say in the least, right? If your history is connected to the Ahom world, how do you connect to the cultivator, Miya cultivator as they're called today, in Eastern Assam, with whom you have absolutely no foods, you don't have a language similarity, you don't have food similarity, you don't have any education similarity. How do you? So that is one of the biggest problems. And Muslims never developed a leadership that actually tried to pull up everybody equally, right? So they were left as cultivators by everybody. Now you have a Muslim community from this Bengali-speaking Miya community who are educated, almost upper class, right? Then there is the middle class. And the upper class Miyas now cannot connect to those absolutely lower class Miyas who are still stuck in the villages and practicing polygamy or, doing things that they also denounce. They're like, this is not, this is not what Islam should be. And it teaches you, Islam teaches you to be a good person and to treat your women well and to be, God-fearing and all of that. So these people, they find, don't listen to them. I have heard so many of them tell me the story that we can't reach out to them because their illiteracy is so acute that they will not connect, they will not listen, right? And so then people, the BJP takes a lot of advantage and creates narratives of population explosion, land jihad, all kinds of jihad that these Muslims are doing there. But it really is, nobody had worked with them, nobody had helped the development. And now suddenly they're seeing as a big threat. So Muslims, the Eastern Assam Muslims are really caught now in this bind. The BJP has divided the Muslims into two groups. One is called the indigenous Khilonjia Muslim, and one is called the infiltrator, Miyas, right? And because of the lack of connection, there's very little empathy and compassion and understanding.
That must be also true for the Hindu group, which is also the immigrant, so-called.
No, but they had a backing of RSS and
yes, I mean, they exist, but they're not, put into that frame.
The Assamese Hindus and Bengali Hindus are still kind of divided. Barak Valley Hindu, because also, as I said, geography has also divided people. So they are they will not say we are the same. The Assamese Hindus they don't want to give up the claim of Assam. For them, Assam is their place. Although they are a minority community, number-wise, they are a smaller community. It's only when you bring all of the different tribal Hindu groups and other groups, they become a majority community. But by themselves, they are a minority community. Assamese speaking is actually a smaller community than non-Assamese. It is the Miya community, when they had to do a language survey in the 50s, to declare a state language, the Miya community declared Assamese as their native language because of persuasion of the Congress party at that time to tell them that to make this your language. And suddenly Assamese looked like it is the majority language in Assam. And that's how Assamese became the state language, right? But the people who claimed Assamese as their mother tongue were not given the benefits of becoming an Assamese. Rather, they are now being derided, insulted, humiliated, and dehumanized as Miya. But you took advantage of them at that time when you had to make this into a state language, right? And so the Muslims of Assam still do not know what they are struggling with, right? So I consider this is, there is something, what I'm trying to theorize is something, I call it ethical and historical loneliness. Nobody recognizes your suffering, the Miya suffering, nobody recognizes. They can cry to the high heavens, nobody hears it. There's a completely ethically, they are bereft, right? There's no recognition of their pain and suffering. In fact, it is instrumentalized into a threat. And the Khilonjia, the indigenous Ahomia Muslim, who has lived there for centuries along with the Ahoms and built that place together, are today erased from history. And said, they don't exist. We are giving you a place to stay here as indigenous because we are so compassionate towards you. But the Muslims of that group had built this place alongside the Ahoms and all the other groups, what we consider Assamese. So there's a historical loneliness of not knowing what history do you have now? You don't belong to Delhi, you don't belong to rest of India. Where is it?
Even if you're called infiltrators, Bangladesh does not recognize you.
No, even if I call them Bangladeshi, there's still a place called Bangladesh. I'm just saying. And if they say, I want to go there, okay. If they take you, where does the Assamese Muslim go? Assamese Muslim have no other home except Assam. Where do you put these people? There's a complete historical loneliness. If you don't belong in history, where do you belong? You have to have a history somewhere, right? That you can connect and claim.
if the so-called Miyas are proven, and NRC proved that they are not from Bangladesh, they are from here. But even by some hook or crook, you force them. You speak Bengali, you do this. Okay, there is a place called Bengal, there's a place called Bharat, there's a place called Bangladesh. These can be somewhat identified and said that there is where does the Assamese Muslim go? They are not Urdu speakers, they're not Hindi speakers. They have nothing to do with rest of Indian Muslims. They are only Assamese, and the religion is Islam. Where do you place them? Under what category of people do you place them? So this is, I think, the biggest conundrum for us Assamese, for Muslims in Assam now. Where does the Muslim fit? It's not a question of belonging now. I'm not even talking of belonging. It's a loneliness of a kind that you cannot really fill it up. Because to fill it up, you have to have a location, right? So it's a way of becoming orphans of history. So when you're an orphan, you'll just bhatakte rahenge, you'll just keep moving around without finding a destination. There's no destination. And I think that cruelty, that violence, that epistemic violence that has been done is something you cannot really overcome unless you have a different vision. Because you cannot construct a place for them, you cannot construct a new territory, you cannot build like Palm Jumeirah, whatever in Dubai, they have built islands, right, in the sea. Out of sand, they've just made artificial islands. Now you have to make a place and say, this is your story. I say, I don't know. I just don't know what they can do with the Muslims of Assam. You just can't tell them that where do you locate them? So that loneliness that Muslims are suffering from is very different. It's, as I said, it is an existential loneliness. It's not just a fight with some legal thing that my citizenship or lack of it. It's a fight for your human identity. So it's a much more complex issue if you think of it, and we can think longer and harder about it. But this is the real epistemic violence that is happening. So as I said, in history, we were us. In history, the Assamese, there was no Assamese, it was an us, and us was a growing community. Today, the us is claimed by a few people, and they're discarding the rest of them. And where? They'll go to the tree, they'll go to the sky. Where will these people go? So that historical, that epistemic violence, that destruction of history, and doing it with purposefully, knowing that this is going to devastate a few million people in this place, is a violence of extreme kind. You don't have to go kill them. You have killed them even when they're living.
Dr. Yasmin Saikia, the way you have described, especially loneliness, the epistemic injustice and the epistemic violence that is occurring, that is being done to a population in Assam. So when I connect to it as a larger Indian project, so at some time people used to talk about the Gujarat model, and then people started talking about the Assam model, and then the people talked about the UP model. So ultimately these are pockets of contextualized, localized ways of otherization, specifically tailored towards one community in the Indian context, and which the way I see it, that this is expanding, different logics from different contexts are expanding together to build this what they already have, the civilizational logic of Indic civilization, where the Muslim becomes the lonely existence. And that kind of loneliness, I mean, not to the extent that you described it, because of historically speaking, before it happened here, the experiment has been happening in Assam. But also when you extend it globally, this whole idea of the Islamic Muslim other, the otherization right now, at some point in history, Jews in the European context were a sort of in the European context, a global other, whatever Europe constituted at the time. So that position for some time was taken by communists in the Soviet era. But even before the Jews, the Crusades and everything, there was a Muslim trope and the Muslim stereotype and history, which continued to, again after the 90s, a global Islamophobia again emerged. So Muslims in the world itself, I personally see they feel lonely. So they feel, and there are two parts of it. One is being to feel lonely, and the other is to do anything or not do anything about it. So I want to focus on that before going to the way forward. What can be done about it? I want to know that you shifted to, you've been working from America as now you're a citizen. Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're an American citizen now for working so long, participated, contributed in this society, and you build this center with Dr. Chad Haynes on Center for Muslim Experience, and which largely also somehow talks about that alienation and how to deal with that. So what is this global alienation? That's not just restricted to the small Assamese, Miya, Ahom population, but it's a larger global, it evolved into this larger global project. And why is Muslim the, center of all of that?
That's a very complex question, because when you look, as you said, in disparate ways, fragmented communities, different places in the world have felt in different moments of time a sense of, as I said, being bereft. It's a philosophical concept of feeling bereft, of being abandoned, right? And when you are abandoned, where do you turn? You turn to people that you think would empathize with you, would understand your pain and suffering, and would respond and relate in some way your problem and make it a general problem to redress, right? To address and sort of look for a solution. But rather what you're saying, you see a constant fragmentation of Muslims as not belonging anywhere. And as you said, the historical kind of antecedents to it. But let's not go to distant history, right? We can't create a continuum and say, from the Crusades on, it's always been this. No, there were moments in which flourished. You had three of the main empires in the world. Yes. Mughals, Safavids, and the Ottomans.
So for me, it was a memory that people are saying now that Islamabad, they're taking from that memory in that context.
Yeah, but they're making this connection in order to, for me, it's not a historical connection, it's an ahistorical connection. Mm-hmm. But in the post-colonial world, right, generally speaking, you have found that countries that had a large majority Muslim population have been divided up in ways that balkanization, right, of the Middle East that has happened, South Asia that has happened, and now you're coming to the context of European Muslims and American Muslims, and where do they come, where do they belong? Most of these people, particularly in the European case, Muslims have had a very long interaction with Europe, right? It's not a new interaction.
Yes.
And then after Second World War, and even before Second World War, when there was a development of, say, industrial development, a lot of Muslims from different parts of the world moved to these industrial places to become workers there. And they had contributed in very meaningful ways with labor and ideas and just sweat and tears, right? But today they don't have a place in Europe, right? Muslims may have lived there for over 150 years. I'm talking of, the Muslims, contemporary 20th century Muslims and 21st century Muslims, but they're still considered immigrants, guest workers, outsiders, and today we use terms like refugees and asylum seekers. And Europe takes pride in the fact that we are giving them a place, or there are asylum seekers and we are giving them. But actually, there has been a lot of interaction. Colonialism had devastated those worlds, and now they are coming and living in these places, but suddenly they look like they are outsiders. But the European colonialists went to those places. So your question is, why did this happen, right? Why is that the Muslim made to feel? That's a very there's no yes and no answers that you can say this led to this and that led to that, but a complex conglomeration of industrial development, post-colonialism, post-colonials, world wars, new imperialism, all of that have come to define a Western political approach to the control of the rest of the world. And it has not really done a very good job. It controls, but it does not connect, right? It wants to control those places even today, although they're not ruling those places as colonial masters. They want to control those places and the people in those places. And when they cannot control, then they sort of start giving them negative terms, negative names and whatever. The American Muslim story, however, is very different. The American Muslim story is also not of today. It's actually very much part of the foundation in America. As I told you very early on in this discussion, that when I started studying American history, I became very interested in the slavery. But in all the books that I read and all the courses that we took, we had a lot of information about how slavery was an inhuman project. And there was an economic inhumanity, and there are social, cultural, the inhumanity of the human, right? But there was mention of actually who these people were. People were very concerned about how they have wronged the people, but who were the people they have wronged? The people were described as some kind of maybe heathens, they were forcibly brought here. The story that you normally get is that Africa had no culture and civilization, and then they were brought here, and of course they were oppressed and used as slaves and in the capitalist agriculture of America. But their own cultures, their own past, that was never really investigated. It was now that I started then studying more, as we started this Center for Muslim Experience, started looking into the history of the Black community as people. Not what they are telling me that their labor produced this much capital for America, or their 200 years of slavery created these pockets of communities, Black communities and white communities, and segregation and violence and all of that. But to study who these people are, right? And I found that from reading very new research, this is not a research when I was going to university in America in the late 80s, early 90s. This was not the research that was emerging. This is like in the mid 90s, it appears, that some people started doing some research on these Black communities as people. Who are these people? And now more recently in the 2010, 2000, that decade, right? Few books have started coming out that actually show us that the Black slaves in America were also of Muslim descent, right? And just not statistics that you can overlook when there are 10% of the people are of Islamic origin from West Africa. What happened to that religion? 10% of the people were completely annihilated, or the religion was completely destroyed. These people became something different. They were forced to become something different, not just forced to produce labor, but forced to become something different and forget their own past, right? So Islam is actually foundational to America. As soon as America had also established itself, Muslims were also here, and they were building this country alongside these other groups who were also building this country. In a way, it's very much like the Assam story, right? The Muslims were there alongside the Ahoms and alongside the other groups of people and building the Assamese community. But the Muslim is the one who is erased. Others have all found some kind of recognition, whether as a scheduled tribe or scheduled caste or a caste Hindu, right? But the Muslims have been made to disappear, except negative terms like infiltrators and ghuspitia or termites or everything negative, illegal. They're basically illegal human. They don't belong in this history. Likewise here, the Muslims were made, there's a complete disappearance of the Muslim, and it was not done as deliberately by politics, but it was done without any recognition of their humanity. If we agree and if we acknowledge the fact that Muslims were also foundational to America, then entire American history has to change. It's not just the white people coming and building and black people doing labor. The black people had religion and they had culture. And the religion that has been removed is Islam. So today when you have the black community of Muslims in America, they're not the descendants of the original black Muslims. There's a new group that has come out, right? By looking into their past, some of them said Islam may have been in our past. We choose to be Muslim as a way of resisting or undermining the project of transforming us into the way that the white masters want us to be. We don't conform to that anymore. We choose what we want to be, and we choose to be black Muslims, right? Now, other groups of Muslims have also been coming to America, not just now. From around the late 1800s, Muslims have been coming, particularly with Ottoman Turkey. The United States of America had a very good relationship, and Ottoman Turks were coming here both to learn about some things basically in the army, or to sort of disseminate knowledge about warfare and new equipment and artillery and all of that. So that's one group, that armed kind of group. And lots of Muslims also served in the United States Army, the early United States Army, first in World War, Second World War, both. Then there is the groups of Muslims who had come from different parts of the decolonial now Middle East. As the colonialism was ending, people were also, first the Ottoman Turkey, when it was dismantled after First World War, a lot of Muslims of the Ottoman subjects, not Turks, but say Bosnians and Albanians and other groups of Muslims of that region were coming to the United States to work in the new industries, like mining, mostly mining and in sales. They would come and sell, they're peddling salesmen, right? Lebanese and Syrians and Bosnians, those were the communities. Again, no studies have been done about these itinerant salespeople who actually settled in America. Likewise, South Asians were coming in the early 20th century, 1910, 1920, particularly from areas today what we know as Bangladesh, East Bengal, as Lashkars, seamen who were coming. And then they sort of started peddling trade, and then they settled down here, and they have created communities here. Most of them have more or less disappeared. Some of them continue because they married here, they had children here, and some of the children continue with the religion of the parents and the grandparents or great-grandparents. Some of them do not. And so that Muslim community is old, but also has lost a lot of its members over time.
Lost in the way that they've given up on their
religion, because there was no community to support them, right? It was and these are poorer people, let's say, itinerant traders, small people working in factories. A lot of people came to work in the automobile industry, right? In the area of Michigan and Detroit that you had a lot of Muslims who came to work in these automobile places, and they established communities. There were a lot of Arab people. So you have a variety of Muslim people coming during the early 20th century, before First World War and after. Then suddenly there was a break in immigration law. Right? And people were not allowed, certain kinds of people were not allowed to become, were not given the passage to come and settle here and become naturalized citizen over time, right? Because they were not considered Caucasian. Only the white people could become.
This break happened when?
This, for the South Asians, for Asians on the whole, East and South Asians, it was in 1923.
Okay.
There was a bill that was passed that had some kind of exclusion in bill that they could not come here and they could not settle here. Okay.
But they could work?
very few people came. They came as undocumented and stayed and worked, few of them, but they could not become citizens of this country. So they didn't have right to property, right to any kind of recognized association, right? So that's why many of them also lost their religion, because they married locally, they did not have any identity, and the children took the religion of their mothers, and they found their community through that, right? So this continued till 1946. In 1946, those people who were already here of Asian descent, I'm talking now of just South Asian descent, because these were now not considered Caucasian. They had been taken off the list of Caucasian. So because you are not white, you cannot be a citizen of this country. But Lebanese, Syrian, they could be. They were considered Caucasian people. So that's why you had a growth of the Middle Eastern kind of Muslim immigrating and getting citizenship, but you had less of the South Asian or other kinds of Asian Muslims coming, like Indonesians and Chinese Muslims and other kinds of Muslim. In 46, they changed the law and gave the right of naturalization to the people who have been living here in the United States, right? But immigration was still closed. You are not allowed to immigrate. It is in the 60s, I think it's 65, that the immigration doors were open. And that's when Muslims started coming, along with all other groups of people that started really flooding into America. And that's when you have the development of new groups of Muslims who are mostly educated or have come here for education, right? And that's the group that today in America, you see, have really set their roots. They are like here for the last 60 years or something. And they have set the roots, and they have second and third generation of people. And they were able to form associations, because they were educated and they had potential for employment. They were all legal. They were able to earn good money. Then they were able to establish mosques. And all the mosques were already there. This is not the first mosque were already built by the Lebanese and other groups of people, but they were sporadic and small and here and there. And the first one was actually in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that the first mosque was built by Syrian Syrian Muslims who had settled there. They were all tradespeople.
What year?
1924 or something. I have to look at it. I have to tell you exactly. Early 20th century. And then say, for example, there was a mosque that they built in California. And I have interviewed people who used to go to that as a congregation, but the mosque really came about later on. But as a congregation, they could meet. And those were the people who got naturalized in 46. So post-65, the Muslim population from different parts of the world that started coming legally, settling with education, were doing well, started establishing their own little mosques and groups. And so they became more identifiable. And we know that there is a lot of Muslim development. But what is the percentage? It's still a very small group of people. It's around 7 million of Americans today are Muslim, okay? And these are Black Muslims, Middle Eastern Muslims, South Asian Muslims, few converted Muslim. The largest group is South Asian Muslim in America, right? Because they came with education. So we have of the 7 million, over 25% are of South Asian descent. The second group is the Black Muslim, and then the other groups. So the Middle Eastern are smaller. Middle Easterns are a smaller group. They're around, I think, 15% of Muslims are Middle Eastern, or Middle Eastern descent. South Asian and Black are the highest, so South Asian being the highest. Another thing about the South Asian Muslim, they're the largest group, but also they're the most educated group. And so their per capita income is quite high. So they have become, kind of leaders in communities. The Black Muslim community has the least education, and the largest number of people in what we'll consider in America, the poverty level. The Black Muslims are nearly 30% of Black Muslims are below the poverty level. So it's a poorer community. And the Middle Eastern Muslims, you also have a lot of Iranians who came after 79 or before 79 with the fall of the Shah. That's when lots of Iranians came to this country, and they consider themselves Persian, and so you have a lot of them. So Muslim is also in this country is a very conglomerate kind of variety. It's a diverse kind of community, as I said, class-wise, education-wise, history, their ethnicity, their background, their cultures, their variety. So it's a very diverse group of people. Probably the most diverse community in America is the Muslim community. And they represent over 80 ethnicities. So you have the world Muslim here. The 7 million is a small number. It's only like around 1.5% of Americans are Muslim. But in that 1.5%, you have the whole world being represented. So that's the beauty of this community, that it's so diverse that it brings the global culture to America in their own, in their own being, right? And so they have made America richer through cultural kind of transmission and translations. So you can now go anywhere, even in a small place in America, United States, you can get hummus and pita bread. You can get halal meat. Means hummus and pita now everybody is eating. It's an American, part of American diet. But it came with the Middle Easterners, right? You get, say, falafel, and you get kebabs. It's part of American diet. All of that comes with the Muslims. They bring this here, right? I'm talking of food. Food has diversified with Muslims coming here.
A lot of kahwa shops, they've opened. In Chicago, I saw a couple of them, Iranian, other Lebanese restaurant, Persian, Yemeni restaurant. So very diverse.
Afghan restaurants, Pakistani restaurants, Bangladeshi restaurants.
Indian restaurants, I saw
Indian
a couple
restaurants,
in Michigan.
All over. So they have become very, they have added color to America in a very unique way, because it's not just from one place. It's coming from so many different places. Turks, there's so many Turks, right? So this has made America, as I said, culturally richer. If you have 80 different ethnicities itself of Muslims contributing to America, you can see 80% means 80 nationalities, 80 communities of the world, and there's so many more, right, in the different contexts. So why is then this group of people so varied, so diverse, so culturally rich, so hardworking, you can say, who has done so much for this country and want to do so much? Why do they feel that they are alienated, and that there's an approach of distinguishing them as less American, or distinguishing them as a problem sometimes? And the problem is not simply, I'm not talking simply of violence or terrorism. The domestic Muslims are not seen so negatively as instruments of violence, but there is other ways in which they distinguish as lesser. They oppress their women. They want Sharia laws. These are cooked up stories that are cooked up about them. And there's a proliferation of this kind of messaging outside for the tiny 1.5% of the people, and a big noise is made. So one has to ask who benefits from this noise, because these people have come here for a good life, most of them, and to do well, right, for themselves and the children and the grandchildren. They have hope that this country, America, will do it, will help them achieve something. And they have achieved. It's not that they have not achieved. But simultaneously, there is this discourse that there is a problem with this community. So somebody is benefiting from making this story, right? And once you let that story seep into you, and you start believing that you are a problem, that's when you as me, could then crumble.
How is the Western academia, because you are from the academic background, and how has the Western academia contributed to this stereotyping of Muslims, and is there space for the Muslim identity in the Western academia, as Western academia is seen to be very, diverse, very open, very liberal, and is it as inviting to the Muslim sentimentalities or the Muslim ideas or the Muslim ways of thinking as it has been to other, civilizations?
It was not like it was that American academia was somehow hostile to Muslim academics and Muslim work. It was not there, right? But there is a whole worldview of Orientalism that is being used and has been operationalized and has actually produced results. We know about it, right? Colonial, post-colonial, post-post now, all of those issues. So Orientalism itself is an idea that is not new. That's not an American homegrown kind of idea. It comes out of Europe. So Orientalism has been a discourse that has been going on in academia, and who is suffering from it and not. But Muslims themselves, like a South Asian Muslim, was not seen as a South Asian Muslim per se, was seen, say, for example, an Indian. Whether you're Pakistani or Bangladeshi, or you're from India, you're an Indian. And the moment it becomes Indian, there can be two approaches to it. One is you are Hindu, right? And sometimes, very poor country. India is a very poor country, and so you guys have come here because of poverty. Or it would be something like, it's a very ancient civilization, and you have really rich culture. Where is the Muslim in it? Nobody seems to know nor care about it, right? At least when it came to South Asia. So there is not an anti-Muslim academic approach until there has been a rise of Islamophobia. Of course, you have people like Samuel Huntington and others who have been writing about this question of clash of civilization. And from a idea, it has become an industry. Right? And who are you clashing against? You bring the politics that is happening in the Middle East and you bring it here and you say we are clashing against Muslims. Then you had 9/11 and you said the Muslims came and destroyed America. And so they are our enemies. But so there's a rise of Islamophobia. Islamophobia has given a certain kind of twist in academia to be either speaking on behalf of Muslims or to be speaking against Muslim. But who is that Muslim they're speaking against is very hard to pinpoint. It's a figure of a Muslim. It's a figure of a threat. Is it inside your home in America or is it outside? So then they keep finding this kind of phantasmic figure, right? And anything that happens is then pinned onto the Muslim. Right? But academic work itself has never really denied the space to work and study about Islam or Muslim communities anywhere in the world. But because of this popularization of this other discourse of Islamophobia, or starting with Orientalism, moving to Islamophobia, has given a certain kind of license to people to just say that Muslims are a problem without really knowing much about the history that I told you of this relationship that has been going on for over a century and a half, right? So academic work, this is one beauty in America, however, nobody stops you from what you want to study. You can study as much as you want to study on Muslims. And people have been doing it. There are a lot of universities with very developed, highly developed centers of Islamic studies, right? Middle East and Islamic studies. Lots of places have been doing it for for now decades, right? So it is going on simultaneously as much as this discourse is also out there. How much we are able to utilize that knowledge that had been created about Islam and Islamic studies by various scholars for generations, 2-3 generations of scholars have produced this knowledge and actually proliferate that knowledge further in order to not speak back or combat this Islamophobic discourse, but to be able to keep on doing the work as building on knowledge building on knowledge, so that some people will continue to pay attention, that there's something very important to learn from Muslims because they're producing knowledge that actually makes us think about some issues.
But if you're going to all get fixated with this Islamophobia and this and that, we are undermining our own history here in America. History of both knowledge creation and the histories of the people who had built this country.
So a large part of the problem is that the way people look at Muslims, as you pointed out a few minutes ago, is that the culture of Islam or the culture of Muslims, the ideas, the values, they're not compatible with the Western values, the values of democracy.
No, I'm going to change that. I'm saying they're very compatible.
No, that's what I want to ask. That is the understanding. I'm saying that
misrepresentation.
There's a misrepresentation. And so that continued misrepresentation of the incompatibility of the Islamic values with the Western ideals. So it has created a certain level of uneasiness, and you created this Center for Muslim Experience, and you talked about these ethnicities, nationalities, and they become Americans and their experience of being Americans and participating in this. So what is the center doing, differently, in the sense that how is it relocating the Muslim experience as participating into the values of justice, the values of building, the values of development, and where do you see is the conflict?
See, values, Muslim values, or Muslims who draw on the values coming out of Islamic history and particularly prophetic knowledge, is something that everybody can appreciate, right? It's because it's talking of rights and duties of being good human beings, right? If you are living in a country, you work and serve and making it in a practical way, right? According to Islamic thing, wherever you are, you remain loyal to that place. You work well, you contribute to that place, but you also should have the rights in that place. So rights and duties are to be coupled together. So right to vote, right to exercise what you're saying, the liberal democracy, the right to vote, the right to be a community, right to have representation is a very Islamic norm. And it's a very American norm, right? These are very common things. Right to justice, social justice is a very American thing, that people should have justice. The system should be just. Its law should be blind and should deliver justice. Islam thoroughly believes in the concept of justice, both social justice and human justice, right? You look at what you said, equality of all human beings. America, one of the principles of America is equality, freedom, equality, and liberty, which are also very close to Islamic values. So it's almost like parallel, it's almost similar. If you can speak to them in a way without bringing religion and say, this is how original Muslim principles are based on these foundational principles. Islam is based on these foundational principles. Any American would also understand, because they're very common. Now, something, as you said, what does a center like us then is trying to do? If it's so similar, why is there then such a big fear and a difference, right? A center like us is precisely trying to do this kind of work to show that there is both a place for a theoretical understanding of these knowledge and speak and dialogue to these different kind of knowledge schema in a more productive manner, rather than, oh, you guys do this and you guys don't do this. Rather, let's see this common values, right? Civility is a very important value, right, in Islam. And civility is a very important value in America. So we are trying to think of these values that resonate with one another, and we can show how Muslims have drawn on these values to build their community, in their own community in America, and contribute to the larger American community. But that narrative has not been written. That narrative has not been documented, as I said, right? There are only some laws that have been passed. Can you come in? Can you not come in? If you have this identity, you're not allowed. If you have that identity, you may be allowed. If you are Caucasian, you can come in. If you are South Asian Muslim, you could not come in legally until 1946, right? So we are trying to document that these histories that we have had of the Muslims have never been actually pulled together and have been given a place in American history. American history
actually should include Muslims in its history. This is what I was trying to tell you, that 5 to 10% of the slaves in America were Muslims. So if you, in the foundational narrative, there should be the history of Muslims in America from the very beginning. And this center is trying to show that you have to include that story, because otherwise your narrative is incomplete. The American history narrative is incomplete. So it is not an Islamic history project, it's an American history project. Right? That you bring these people, these narratives, you talk about their contributions, you talk about the sacrifices they have made for this country, you show how they have been good members of this society. There have been always bad apples, we are not going to ever overlook, but there have been also huge contribution. So we are trying to also document the contribution, not just the theoretical values, but how are the values lived by people? How have they contributed? What does it mean to sort of be a good neighbor? How have Muslims behaved as a good neighbor here? Building parks, doing shelters for where everybody is able to take advantage, helping with other refugee communities. They're doing the work of civil society building, right? So documenting those narratives, bringing them into the attention of the public audience, and being able to share with the public, but also create a research concept, a research platform for studying the Muslims of America. Because as I said, there's a 200-year-old history that has not been studied. So you need to research that history. You need to talk of the diversity. You need to talk of these communities not as just Muslims, but they're Senegalese Muslim. They are from West Ghanaian Muslims. There are, from the Sudanese, the Sundaland belt, which was called the Sundalands in those days, Gambia. So they are different Muslims compared to the Muslim who came from Turkey, Ottoman Turkey. So you need to see these cultures. You need these people. You need to develop that research. And only when you do the research, then you can create the narrative. And when you create the narrative, you share it not just with fellow academics, but with the public. And the most important group that we are interested in is the youth group, because they need to know that their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents for the Muslims are as American as somebody else. And the American non-Muslims should also know that these people are as American as they are. So to in a way, not influence, but in a way inform the younger generation that America is this diversity, and this diversity is not of today. It has a very deep root in which Muslims have played a very important role.
One of the challenges that we face, Dr. Saikia, back in India is when there are the RSS, the BJP, and they have a very particular agenda, their political goals and the way they want to construct the society in their own advantage. Even in America, there are certain groups that would like to, for Muslims to be seen in a certain way, and they're big enough groups. Back in India. So when we're telling this story, there are two parts of the story. One is the part of this genuine oppression that we are facing, and the other part is the genuine contribution and the genuine legacy of being together in this region or specific geography or specific nation. So sometimes what I have observed in two kinds of academic works is either somebody is focusing too much on this side of, from the positionality of being othered completely. And the other part of the story is always about this, good feeling, syncretism, both of which have coexisted and existed. Sometimes something has become more dominant, sometimes the other thing has become more dominant. So in that context, so there is also this burden of telling the story for what it is. I mean, the groups, what they end up doing is they end up diluting one strand of truth for the attainments for achieving some other end goal. So how do we deal with this and this kind of dichotomy in this center, that we talk about the groups or the frameworks or the movements that actually, because your work also, you're talking about the way RSS went into the Assamese population. So there's this group of Hindus, for example, or the majority, who sees India in a certain way. And because now they are the predominant power group, so they also hold that positionality of imposing that worldview on the larger population or reflecting on that. So that creates a level of conflict. How do we deal with that? Because that is one of these most challenging things that we face as people who try to negotiate and engage with different communities, because these stories come back to us and then we have to deal with both parts of it. Either we say, okay, no, there are some groups of Muslims who are like these, and then we try to take a very pacifist stand, or we say, no, that's not true, it's you did and this group did that, and then they are somehow associated with that identity in a very small and but meaningful way, and they take it personally. So even the response is very complicated, and we are not yet, personally speaking, wherever I've seen work. So how does CME, or how does your scholarship, what does it intend to do in these conflictual, settings where these meaningful conversations need to happen of stating the truth in both the ways?
First of all, I have to say, I'm not a scholar who is reactionary. And I don't react to whatever others are telling me, and I'm responding to their reaction. I believe in building. And as I told you very early on in this discussion, I take that lesson or take that instruction, guidance from Sir Syed. You build. You don't sit and just keep complaining, and you don't keep thinking what they did to me. Now let me respond to that. They talk of me this way. I have to give them a fitting reply. I'm not wasting my energy dignifying some nonsense, right? I am spending my time and making an effort, and I know there are many people like that here who are building on what we know has been a story that, as you're saying, that has not really appeared on the surface. Because the other story has proliferated from Orientalism, or means we have this proliferation of this negative story. I'm not going to sit and waste my time thinking of this negative story that they've constructed about me as a kind of figure that was in their imagination. I'm real. I'm a human being. I'm real. People like me are real, right? And I'm documenting, researching, and trying to develop these narratives of real people who have done some real things. Yes, we are not looking at just these high accomplished people who have, the architect who designed Sears Tower at that time is a Muslim man, right, from the subcontinent. There are massive, contributors for, say, for example, today, you have been in Chicago. There's absolutely wonderful civic work that is going on in inner city Chicago that is run by Muslims, okay? And they're helping everybody, inner city Black people. They're really looking out for the down and out people. We are not only talking of those people who are highly accomplished, right? We are talking also of the everyday person who has been absolutely forgotten in history. Like, I'm living in Arizona, and in Arizona, there are two historic moments of Muslim contribution that people don't even know. One is the small group of Muslim farmers from South Asia, from the subcontinent, India and Pakistan, that lived here in the 1920s and 30s. And they were the people, particularly one man from now Uttar Pradesh in India, Mubarak Ali Khan, who worked tirelessly to get the South Asians, not just Muslims, South Asians recognized to have the right of naturalization in this country. And he worked from 1930s till 1946, till this bill was passed, allowing South Asians to become naturalized citizens. Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, everybody benefited from this act, right? It was not based on merit. His other companion, Ajit Singh, from New York, who worked for the naturalization, he had asked for a merit-based quota, right? Merit-based quota only gave a few hundred and some number of Indians to become naturalized citizens because they had a merit to get naturalized. They were doctors, they were professors, they were, educated. Mubarak Ali Khan worked for those unspoken, invisible, unknown South Asians who were working in the lumber industry, who were working picking strawberries and grapes in the farms in California, who were growing melon in Arizona, who were working as in New Orleans as tradespeople. So these were the unknown South Asians, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, everybody, right? Who are now included and allowed to become naturalized citizens. This happened in Arizona. I'm researching that to say, it's not because this one Muslim man was suddenly so benevolent, but he understood the meaning of what is the power of a citizen, right? So let's all work to make this citizenship available to everybody who is working hard. That story needs to be told, right? And people need to know that it was the tireless effort of this man who actually had very little, right? He was just a farmer and had very, very little. Another momentous thing that happened right here is that miners from Bosnian miners who had come here and had been working here in the early 1900s and also had later joined the American army and worked and fought in the First World War on behalf of the United States. Who knows about the stories of these small subaltern figures, right? Who had actually contributed a lot. With death, they have contributed by dying for this country. So we need to tell those narratives rather than thinking about they are talking about us as this and that. Let's react and write a whole history about how to respond to their misconstruction about us. We don't waste time with misrepresentation. We create real narratives of real people who have done real things that may not look like luminous stars on the horizon, on this map of some historical narrative, of the large history, but they are the small history of small people who also have the dignity, who also have stories to tell, and who deserves to be heard, right? Deserves to be heard and listened to. So that's the work we are doing. Who RSS is, what they're telling about Muslims in India or here is not my concern. They can create this fictitious figure as much as they want, but there are real people that we can document and show that these real people have real contribution.
Thank you, Dr. Saikia. Very interesting conversation with you. Mm-hmm. And if there is some last way forward message if you want to give to not just normal Muslim people, but people who are trying to do academic work on, generally speaking, what is this identity crisis that we're facing. It's not just about Muslims. Basically, it's multiplicities of identities or having similar, crisis in different contexts. That's true for Ukraine and Russia. That's very true for even Dalits in India. There are always these subaltern populations who in their own context are facing similar struggles. And this is a fight for dignity, as you rightly argued. It's about telling your own story. So how do you think that, of course, you've laid out all the map, but in briefly speaking, if there's a message you want to give, what should be the methodology now taken in the sense of reading into these, apart from documenting personal lives, but also how to...
No, not personal, like community lives. True, maybe sometimes the prism of an individual, but you're not doing individual stories. It's the community stories, because you have to anchor it somewhere, right? How do you talk of citizenship? Mubarak Ali becomes the anchor. This is just a prism, but the real problem is citizenship. Who has a right to be a citizen of America, right? So, or whose death should be mourned and remembered, right? There's theoretical work on this, the grievability of some people or the non-grievability of some people. So a lot of people have not been grieved because people have not really taken their contribution as something that is worth grieving over. So it is not individual stories. It is this conceptual questions that we're trying to understand by actually anchoring it in the lives of real people and not fictitious phantoms that people are chasing.
It's also, in a way, owning your own history.
Ownership of your own narrative.
Yes, owning your own narrative, reclaiming what you've contributed. Telling a different side of the story, and in that sense, sharing it, and in the sense, making your own position in the larger civilization or community that you're part of.
Yeah, because you asked me what will be couple of things I would say. Muslim story has become unshareable. one of the struggles that I have theoretically is the shareability of being a Muslim, right? Can you share? It's not just if somebody is listening. Can you share? It's an unshareability of this problem.
Unpack it a little. How is it unshareable?
Who listens? That ethical dilemma that I'm told you about earlier, the ethical loneliness. If nobody is listening, you're crying in a prison, say for example, you're just surrounded by walls, and you're crying and nobody hears you. How do they know that you are suffering? Because your pain is not shareable. You have been locked away. You have been discarded from the group that one can relate to, one recognizes, one empathizes, right? So Muslim grief, Muslim suffering, that loneliness that I told you about has become unshareable because nobody's listening to it. Why they're not listening? Because they have created a phantom. They have created a Frankenstein in their head and they're placing the Muslim in it and they're saying, you are that, right? And our task is not to accept the dehumanization. I am human, right? I will not concede to your dehumanization. I will claim my humanity by telling about me and people like me who have also been living in the community of other humans. And this is how they have continued to build this human society together, right? That is the project that we are doing. And by doing it, we are showing they have shared with one another. They have given and they have received, right? That shareability of that story, that this story is a shareable story. And in their lives, they have shown it, how they have shared this. And we now want to share it with you. And if you don't want to pay attention, listen, it is your inability. It is your unethicality. It is your indifference and apathy. It is not mine. You have lost your humanity. I have reclaimed mine by showing I'm in a community of people. I come from many places to America. I come from 80 different nationalities to America. I have made this my home, and there are other homes for me. I can have plural sense of belonging, plural homes. One does not erase the other, but I contribute wherever I go. And that is the story of the Muslim. He has contributed wherever they have gone. And that people, we should be able to share that story and create a sharedness in that story. That we didn't do this exclusively ourselves either. We did with the help of many other people, right? We struggled, Muslims struggled, and they survived, and they claimed a place because others were willing to give them a place, right? There is a sharedness in this. So if the sharedness is acknowledged from both sides, we acknowledge the sharedness of the other, that they have given us a home here, and we are not only grateful, we are also going to contribute to this home. We are sharing in the goodness, and they have shared in the goodness of well-being. And you don't want to share with us, you want to dehumanize us, it is your loss. So the shareability of Muslim lives is something that's very, very critical for me right now. This is what I am working on and thinking about.
So one of the exceptional things that I've experienced while working with you is the fact that all of it is being done in the mainstream academia. It is by building these bridges between people and communities and cultures. And it is not being done in isolation, because things done in isolation never reach people's ears. So it's mainstreaming Muslim narratives, Muslim experiences, Muslim cultural inferences, their contributions, even their differences, and their differences in a very civil manner, in a very communicative manner. So I genuinely hope, because this generation and the past few generations are genuinely going through this crisis of loneliness, this crisis of belonging, this crisis of, being able to talk to others, of what it means to be a Muslim. And I really hope that this center by engaging with these daunting questions, very complex, nuanced frameworks. It is not easy. I mean, maybe it's about a particular life, but every life is as complex as the world itself.
Right.
It engages with all of these things. It engages with the society, the economy, the polity, the community, the family. It's not just that individual, as you rightly argued. It's a lens through which you can see how that contribution. When we study people like Gandhi, Marx, Malcolm X, these are still that bigger figures.
Yeah,
but
they are bigger than life figures.
Bigger than life, but still that is, we're looking through their perspective.
Right.
So we're bringing that perspective down to people who, because of lack of power and lack of structures, although they're contributing, their stories did not mean enough. And that those stories are meaningful and they've always contributed. And I hope this center brings that bottom-up approach to civilization, ethics, communication, culture. And I really hope that is what we are able to do. And I see that happening. So,
Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Nice talking to you, Dr. Yasmin Saikia. And I personally believe that is one of the first few conversations that we're recording. Mm-hmm. There is so much work that you've done. We've not touched upon the gendered identity, your work on Bangladeshi women and other, gendered positionalities. We've not.
Or my work on peace.
Your work on peace, actually. Yeah, that was what I was hoping, that we may, get to that direction. But the body of literature is so vast that one podcast already ended up, consuming 3 hours. And I thought that let's do another one when I come back and, take these ideas to what we've not discussed yet, because ultimately what you're trying to do is building peace, mm-hmm. building a world which is peaceful, which is plural, and which has a certain level of easiness when people talk to each other. Mm-hmm. So hopefully next time I come, we discuss all of this.
Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Saikia.
Take care.
Bye.